Teenage janitor's amazing act saves billionaire's wife on flight, the surprising story revealed. Jacob wiped the sweat from his brow as he finished mopping the school's hallway. Each stroke of the broom felt like a testament to his resilience. A janitor at just 17, he felt both pride and sting when classmates snickered at his uniform. The truth gnawed at him. How could anyone dismiss the importance of hard work? He needed this job to support his mother and younger sister, yet the whispers followed him like shadows. Today was supposed to be different. With a rare break from work, Jacob boarded the plane to visit family. His mind buzzed with escape from the demands of his life. He pictured his mother's smile and his sister's laughter. But the comfort was deceiving. Not long after takeoff, a commotion to his left shattered the fleeting serenity. A woman had collapsed. Panic rippled through the aisle, suffocating his fleeting peace. Memories flooded his mind. Late nights, spent watching medical tutorials online to care for his sister during her numerous coughs and fevers. This is it, he thought, the moment I've been preparing for in secret. Heart pounding, he hesitated, his mind racing. Before he could second-guess himself, Jacob pushed through the crowd. The weight of expectation pressed on his shoulders. What if he failed? What if he didn't know enough? As he knelt beside the woman, her face pale against the fabric of her designer dress, clarity struck. He could be more than a janitor. He could be a hero. The chaos swirled around him, yet he somehow found calm amongst the storm. Someone call for help, he shouted, channeling his panic into authority. A flight attendant rushed to grab the defibrillator, but even in that moment, Jacob felt himself beaming with an unknown confidence. He checked for vital signs, recounting every piece of knowledge he had gleaned. Each breath she took felt like a lifeline drawn tighter. The engines hummed behind him, a backdrop for his unanticipated resolve. When the paramedics boarded, they praised his action, words whispering through the cabin like warm whispers. The billionaire husband's eyes met his, a flicker of respect replacing the initial disdain. Yet, as the news of his bravery spread like wildfire, Jacob faced unsought complications. Fame clung to him like an unwelcome second skin. Classmates who once laughed scattered whispers of doubt, challenging the identity he had once worn with pride. This dichotomy of heroism and humiliation. Stay grounded, his mother urged, her voice echoing in his mind as though she were right there with him. Yet how could he remain humble amidst newfound glory? How could he balance being a victor and a janitor? The prestigious high school he had toiled in now offered him a scholarship, but was that really a blessing, or just an illusion tainted with judgment? As his future hung in the balance, Jacob wrestled with his identity. Could he rise above the labels, or would they bind him? Lurking behind the applause was the gnawing anxiety that he was still the same hard-working boy mopping floors, pretending that respect was something he could earn in an unequal world. The voices clashed within him, dragging him deeper into thought, further from resolution. In that moment, nearly everyone in the plane became unaware of the internal battle he faced. The weight of disappointing his family, now alongside the fear of being misunderstood, felt like shackles binding him. Could he truly advocate for those like him, often overlooked and underestimated in a world rich with privilege and filled with eyes watching closely? The answer loomed larger than his new title as a hero, far more complex and daunting than he had ever anticipated. As he navigated this sea of notoriety, Jacob understood one thing. The hefty burden of expectation was just beginning to crush him. Jacob's thoughts spiraled as he descended the plane's stairs, his pulse quickening with each step. The clamor of travelers swirled around him, their lives returning to normal while he felt trapped in a whirlwind of emotion. The applause and gratitude surrounded him in a haze. Faces he recognized now painted him as something he didn't quite understand. He was navigating a space he never wished to occupy, that of a local hero. After the adrenaline had faded, uncertainty settled heavily on his chest. Should he embrace this new identity? Was he still the same Jacob who felt pride in his janitorial work, or had he transformed into something else, molded by the fervor of his actions and their aftermath? The dichotomy was maddening. At home, his mother and younger sister greeted him with joy, but even their warmth felt tarnished by the chaos of the previous day. They hungered for stories of bravery, but all he could muster was discomfort. Their faces lit with pride made his stomach churn. They should be proud of him, Yet all he saw was their disappointment in him having to wear that uniform every day. As the days blended together, school loomed like a dread-filled specter. Jacob returned to classes where whispers ricocheted off the walls, louder than before. How could he endure this toxic atmosphere? When he walked down the halls, he was both admired and scrutinized like a science experiment, a curiosity on display for their intrigue. He had risen like a phoenix, yet the flames felt too close. Then came the scholarship invitation. It dangled before him like a shimmering lure, filled with promise, yet shrouded in suffocating doubt. Could he accept help from an institution that thrives on prestige? Would his acceptance only solidify the prejudice that accompanied wealth? He longed to push back against those who dismissed hard work, to redefine what it meant to be successful. But could he do so without losing who he was? In the sanctuary of his thoughts, Jacob contemplated his next move. He signed up for a debate club that met every Thursday evening, reopening channels of intellectual engagement he had long abandoned. Community venues and classrooms, filled with passionate discussions, ignited something in him, a desire to speak truth to power, to challenge misconceptions that painted people's worth in monetary brushes. His first debate topic was one close to his heart: the importance of labor in society and the recognition of every role, no matter how menial it may seem. He prepared fervently, spearing through research as though it were an armor against his insecurities. The emphasis on understanding and respect for all contributions felt vital, almost like a second chance to shed the labels that confined him to heroes and janitors. The night of the debate buzzed with tension. As he stood before the audience, his heart raced with anticipation. Would they hear him? Would they understand his message? Evoking the bravery that had once surged through him on that plane, he gathered his courage and prepared to launch into the argument. His voice trembled but held a newfound conviction behind it. But just as Jacob earned the nods of approval for his initial statement, a loud voice from the back interrupted. "Who are you to tell us about respect? You're just a janitor." The familiar sting of dismissal ignited fury within him, tangible and electric. Was this his moment of reckoning? Would this encounter spell the difference between embracing his identity or letting it shatter? Jacob inhaled deeply. The silence weighed heavily as he locked eyes with the speaker, determined to respond. The moment of truth drew ever closer. Would he confront this humiliation or forge a new path in the face of it? Would he find the courage not just to fight for recognition, but to redefine it? Jacob steadied himself at the podium, infused with a quiet resolve that dissolved his earlier hesitation. The taunt from the back of the room hung in the air, laden with judgment and misunderstanding. He could either shrink back into shadows or pivot to illuminate the very truths he felt compelled to speak. "Respect is not earned through a job title," Jacob began, feeling his voice resonate with clarity. "It's rooted in our shared humanity. I stand here not just as a janitor, but as someone who has seen the extraordinary in everyday roles." His nerves ebbed, fueled by an impulse he hadn't recognized before. As he spoke, he envisioned the faces of those who cleaned up after disasters, and the workers who labored behind the scenes, invisible yet vital. With every word that flowed, Jacob painted a picture of labor as the backbone of society, framing those derided as lesser with the respect they deserved. Each argument sharpened his focus, warming him against the chill of criticism, yet the dismissive voice echoed through his thoughts, taunting him with every point he made. Was he truly the embodiment of worth he spoke of, or simply an imposter, parading as someone important? He couldn't afford to waver now. "I understand I may not represent the ideal image society often woos. But if we redefine success and acknowledge labor as dignity, then we challenge the very structures that confine us. My actions during the flight were instinctive, and they shouldn't define my worth." The room shifted slightly in his favor, energy coalescing as he caught the glimpse of nodding heads. A woman seated proudly in the front row caught his eye. Her gaze offered encouragement, grounding him. But there were still plenty of skeptics. The voice from earlier pierced through again. "And yet, you're still a janitor. Can you really offer any insight?" A wave of heat surged through Jacob, rekindling doubt. Self-reflection sharpened. This was the fear that had haunted him since his heroics transformed him into a target for derision. Unfurling the tangled mass of thoughts covering his mind, he forced his gaze away from the voice. "I won't deny my job. I take pride in it. But you're not seeing the whole picture. My value, or anyone's, can't be stripped away by superficial titles. Everyone's role contributes to this grand mechanic we call life. With each bold sentence, Jacob felt an unfamiliar energy pulsing through him. He was standing not just for himself, but for everyone who was ignored and belittled. He had embarked on this debate to carve out recognition for those who labored in obscurity, and now he found himself defending his path as fiercely as he had once rescued others. He wasn't merely a janitor. He was a storyteller, a challenger of norms. As he concluded, the applause was thunderous. He had tapped into something that transcended the moniker he once feared. Yet, as he stepped down from the podium, clarity began to seep into his post-debate euphoria. Would that applause hold? Would it signify acceptance and understanding? Or just another fleeting moment that glossed over the complexity of identity? Wrestling with that inner conflict, he was approached by the woman from before. "You were magnificent up there," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with admiration. "I hope you realize how much this matters." But as they spoke, Jacob's mind buzzed with an unsettling notion. Could he maintain momentum in this newfound identity? Or was he simply a young man caught in a fleeting moment of light amidst the shadows that still loomed? The debate's victory provoked a deeper inquiry within him. He could feel a shift occurring, yet uncertainty clung to him like a shroud. What should be his next move? How could he ensure that this moment of bravado translated into sustained change? With those questions echoing in his heart, he left the building, determined to carve a path forward against the weight of doubt. Little did he know that soon he would be faced with a challenge that would test his newfound convictions to an entirely new depth. Jacob paced down the quiet street beneath a pair of flickering streetlights, the applause still ringing in his ears. A newfound confidence swelled within him, but with it came the disquieting weight of uncertainty. He had spoken boldly, but now, as he trudged towards home, he questioned the depth of his impact. Was his voice just that of a temporary flame, flickering brightly but quickly extinguished? The familiar sights of the neighborhood loomed ahead, a universe of simple homes and humble stories. It was where he had first learned about work, dignity, and struggle through his parents' sacrifices. It was where he had picked up his first broom and realized the power of a clean space. But those memories had transformed into something heavier now, each one reminding him of the judgments he faced. As he arrived home, he found his mother sitting at the kitchen table, her hands half buried in a mound of bills. Her face brightened when she saw him, and Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that his achievement could offer her a glimmer of hope. "You did good today, didn't you?" she asked, her voice warm and reassuring. He smiled, but the doubt lingered. "I think so, Mom. People seem to resonate, but I'm still just a janitor. I'm not a leader." "Jacob," her voice took on a serious tone, "you're more than any title. You spoke for people who are often silenced. Change starts with one person having the courage to stand up and be heard." Her belief in him drew out his burgeoning determination. Perhaps this new avenue of influence wouldn't be a transient spark, but a lasting fire. What if he channeled this energy into something tangible? An idea formed halfway between inspiration and anxiety. He leaned against the counter, contemplating his path. What if he organized a gathering, focused on celebrating the often overlooked workers in their community? A venue where stories could be shared and connections forged. But who would attend? Who would believe in something he initiated? His mother noticed his wrestle and prompted, "If you can speak in front of that audience, you can rally a few people." The thought echoed in his mind. What if this was a chance for growth not just for him, but for others who shared his silence? That night, sleep eluded him as he laid curled beneath his blanket, thoughts racing like restless winds. He meticulously traced a plan in his mind, recognizing that he would need allies. Validation from others would empower his mission, but who could he reach fast enough? Morning light filtered through his window, pulling him from restless dreams. He woke with determination simmering just beneath the surface. He typed an email to the woman who had praised him after the debate, seeking her help. A strange sense of urgency enveloped him, as if fate were nudging him forward. He realized that risks were a necessary part of growth. There would always be critics, barriers, and challenges. But he couldn't retreat into silence that would merely echo the doubts of yesterday. Just as he hit send, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was from his workplace supervisor, indicating they needed to discuss an upcoming project involving employee visibility. Anxiety spiked in his chest. Was this an opportunity? Or a potential setback? Another reminder of his station in life? Before he could fully process his feelings, Jacob felt the weight of the moment. It was an intersection between his two paths: the janitor who merely accepted his role, and the advocate he was slowly becoming. The decision loomed. The call held promise, and yet palpable tension knotted in his stomach. He had to choose whether to embrace this challenge or let it slip away. With a deep breath, he resolved to face it head-on, knowing that acceptance of both paths was essential to his growth. A newfound clarity settled over him. The moment had arrived to confront those fears, seize that opportunity, and strive to carve a legacy that transcended mere titles. But would his determination withstand the reality of what lay ahead? As he proceeded to dial his supervisor, a thought flickered in his mind, a chance not only to elevate himself, but to uplift others ensnared in their own doubts. The journey was unfolding, and soon he would discover the true depth of his courage, testing it against the unexpected conflict that awaited him. Jacob held his breath as he dialed his supervisor's number, the call echoing around him like a haunting melody. A brief shiver ran through him, amplifying the urgency of the moment versus the comfort of his existing life. When the familiar voice greeted him on the other end, it pulled him from his introspection. "Jacob, good morning. I appreciate you picking up. We need to discuss a project aimed at increasing employee visibility. Specifically, we want to highlight the contributions of our janitorial staff during the upcoming quarterly meetings." The supervisor's tone was brisk, the words both uplifting and daunting. Jacob's mind swirled with a cyclone of possibilities. This could be a pivotal moment, a request for him to step beyond the shadows of his duties, to share his story not just among his peers, but among the decision-makers in his workplace. Of course, he managed to say, his heart racing. "What do you need from me?" "Well," the supervisor continued, "we need a speech, something heartfelt that captures your experience and the hard work that goes into making our environment welcoming. We want the executives to understand the human stories behind those roles." A wave of pressure washed over him. Not only was he being asked to articulate his life's work, but he was also being positioned to represent a group historically unseen, unheard. The implications of such a task ignited his ambition, yet it simultaneously set off alarm bells in his mind. What if he failed? What if they were only looking for a token's worth of inspiration, not for real change? "Jacob, are you with me?" His supervisor's voice cut through his spiral of chaotic thoughts. With a deep breath, he steeled himself, making a pivotal choice. "Yes, I am. I'll need some time to gather my thoughts." "Great, I'm counting on you. This is a chance for us to show the real value behind our team," she encouraged before ending the call. He stared at the now silent phone, the weight of his new responsibility settling into his bones. It suddenly became clear the coming days would shape not only the perception of his colleagues, but also reshape his self-identity. He needed to divert every ounce of doubt into preparation. As he moved through his workday, the familiar motions of cleaning took on new significance. Each sweep of the broom and every purifying spray of cleaner became part of a larger narrative, a refrain in his emerging speech. He began jotting down notes, encapsulating his experiences, reflecting on moments of dignity that had often gone unnoticed. It was an exploration within himself that he had avoided for too long, a confrontation with the facets of his life he'd overlooked. He saw the tired faces of those around him, the pride hidden behind their smiles. Would they rally behind him if he carved out a voice for them? Could he carry their hopes into the meeting room? That evening, he returned home, fueled by purpose. The house felt warm, shadows dancing against the walls as he recalled his mother's wisdom. She had believed he could spark change, that his voice could matter. He sat at the kitchen table, a blank page before him. He dug into his thoughts and began to write, weaving together anecdotes of his fellow janitors, their struggles, their laughter, the dignity in their labor. Each word became a testament to their collective strength. But as dusk fell, a gnawing fear crept in. What if they wouldn't listen? What if they discarded his words as dismissible? The self-doubt he thought he had pushed aside began to rear its head, challenging his newfound resolve. With every stroke of the pen, he felt the conflict between hope and trepidation, but more pressing was the nagging sense that unless he confronted his fears, they would continue to haunt him. The stakes had elevated. It was no longer just about him. It was about everyone who had faced challenges in silence. The final words of his speech began to form, an echo of resilience building between certainty and doubt. But just as he finished, an unexpected text pinged on his phone, sending his heart racing anew. Would it be a message of encouragement or one that brought renewed uncertainty? What lay ahead could alter everything once again, drawing him deeper into his journey of self-discovery. Jacob hesitated before opening the text, its presence hovering like a specter. He steeled himself for the worst, but was surprised to see a message from a fellow janitor, Maria, expressing pride in what he was attempting. "I'm here for you. Speak for us, Jacob. We need you." The words lit a spark within him, grounding his wavering emotions. For the first time, he realized he wasn't alone. The next morning, fueled by a sense of communal purpose, Jacob resolved to dedicate himself fully to crafting this speech. He arrived at work with his notebook clutched tightly in one hand, a potent reminder of the journey he was embarking upon not just for himself, but for everyone who had been marginalized. As the day unfolded, Jacob found the rhythm of cleaning to be almost meditative. The rhythmic swishing of the broom, the soothing scent of disinfectant, and the sparkle left behind became a symphony of potential. Each task he performed served as another piece of his puzzle, and he began to see how the stories of his colleagues could intertwine with his own. He recalled days spent sharing laughs with Maria, moments of frustration when equipment malfunctioned, and the sheer satisfaction of a job well done. It struck him that these stories weren't merely anecdotes. They were the very essence of their work lives. He envisioned weaving them into a narrative arc that would carry weight and substance, allowing their voices to echo in a space where they were usually silenced. Thus, he scribbled furiously during breaks, distilling raw emotions and experiences into profound truths. Although doubt threatened to cloud his vision occasionally, he pushed through, driven by the vision of his colleagues listening, nodding, and taking pride in their shared stories. As he stood in the supply closet during a brief respite, Jacob's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a reply from his supervisor, asking when he would be ready for a review of his speech. Panic surged through him, cutting through his focused dalliances. The time was approaching much faster than he anticipated, and he wasn't entirely prepared. "Just a few more days," he wrote back, attempting to sound confident even as his stomach churned. He knew he had to confront the doubts curling like smoke in the back of his mind. To articulate the truth of his experiences, he needed to practice, to stand before a mirror, to feel the weight of his words on his tongue. After work, he retreated to the park, a space that provided a comforting cocoon away from the pressures of his life. Glancing around, he spotted a few young adults playing frisbee, their laughter ringing out like freedom. Unbeknownst to them, he envied their casual ease. But then he remembered, this was the same camaraderie he felt with his colleagues. They were a team, bound by shared lives. He pulled out his notes, pacing as he began to recite his speech aloud. As he reached the climax of his narrative, he began to feel the power of his voice rising, breaking free from the constraints he'd crafted around it. Would they see the humanity in their roles, the diligence behind the duty? A small crowd began to gather, an audience forming unbidden, listening intently to the words spilling forth. Yet amidst the exhilaration, uncertainty lurked at the edges of his focus. Would he have the courage to deliver this before the executives? What if he stuttered, lost his train of thought? Just then, an older woman approached him, a kind smile on her face. "I heard you speaking. You have a gift." She gripped his arm reassuringly. "Don't let your fears hold you back." Her words resonated with him, a reminder of the support he was beginning to find in unexpected places. Jacob felt a swell of determination, a flicker of belief igniting within him. He could do this. He would do this. However, the road ahead was fraught with psychological hazards. The next day loomed ominously, encapsulated in the pressure of his pending review. He knew he would have to confront not only his fear of public speaking, but the skepticism that might meet his words. There would be no hiding from the towering expectations surrounding him. In the echoing silence of the park, as twilight faded and stars began to emerge in the evening sky, Jacob realized that everything he had been working towards would soon become a reality. This was just the beginning. The moment of truth drew ever closer. Would he rise to the occasion? Or would he falter when the weight of the moment pressed upon him? Jacob awoke the following morning with the sun just peeking through his window, illuminating the clutter of his room. He stared at the ceiling, a whirlpool of thoughts swirling in his mind, each one pulling him deeper into the sea of anxiety. Today was the day he'd present his speech. A looming dread settled in his chest. Who was he to speak for others, to demand recognition when his own existence felt so insignificant? He took a deep breath and swung his legs over the side of the bed, grounding himself in the familiar routine of getting ready for work. Each brushstroke of his teeth echoed with the doubts he fought against. What if he choked? What if the executives dismissed his words as mere ramblings of a janitor? Yet, in the back of his mind, he recalled the supportive message from Maria, how it had lit a spark in him. That flicker of courage propelled him to face the day, not just for himself, but for those who had shared their stories with him. At work, the errands and duties began to blur into routine. The calmness he once found became a breeding ground for anxiety as the clock ticked toward his review. Time seemed to slow as he scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans, relentless reminders of the chasm between his humble position and the power wielded by the executives he was about to face. During his lunch break, he took a step outside into the bustling soundscape of the city, the air filled with the scent of street food and urgency. He pulled out his notes and began to read them over. But deep inside, he felt like an imposter rehearsing a play far beyond his capabilities. Each word he murmured aloud carried a weight, a significance he worried he couldn't uphold. As the workday came to a close, he stood in front of the mirror in the restroom, heart racing. He practiced the opening of his speech, adjusting his posture, controlling his breathing. "I am Jacob, a janitor, a storyteller," he proclaimed, the echoes bouncing back at him in the tiny room. The power of those words sent shivers down his spine, but alongside it came the tension of self-doubt. Then he caught sight of his reflection, someone he barely recognized. The young man staring back at him had fire in his eyes that he had not noticed before. He was more than a janitor. He was a voice, a bridge to stories that needed to be told. Shifting his perspective gave him strength. Perhaps this fear was not an insurmountable monster, but a signal of importance. With renewed determination, he left the restroom and headed to the meeting room, where the executives awaited. The door loomed before him, a portal between his past and the future he envisioned. Each step felt heavier than the last, yet he pressed on. When he reached for the handle, a flash of panic racked his body. What if they ignored him, dismissed him, labeled him as just another voice not worth listening to? But as he steadied his nerves, he realized the stories weren't just personal anymore. They belonged to a larger narrative, one that needed recognition. The moment of truth had arrived as he opened the door, revealing a cavernous room filled with polished tables and attentive executives. All eyes turned to him, and for a brief moment, the silence felt deafening. Jacob took a deep breath, allowing all the doubt he had to funnel into resolve. What happened next would test not only his courage but the validity of the voices he represented. He stood in front of the room, the weight of expectation hanging palpably in the air when he began his speech. What lay on the horizon would either solidify his newfound role or shatter the fragile confidence he'd painstakingly built up. Jacob's voice resonated in the hushed room, trembling slightly, yet carrying an unexpected weight. As he spoke, he felt the initial recoiling of doubt cling to him, but with each word that sprang from his lips, he began to sense a transformation. The stories he had gathered, the pain, the hope, and the struggles of others poured forth, weaving a tapestry that began to capture the room's attention. That he made eye contact with the executives, a blend of wide-eyed intrigue and skeptical appraisal. A few shifted in their seats, and he could see their pens poised ready to write, a sign that his voice was breaking through their fortress of indifference. As he recounted the poignant tales of his co-workers, those who silently bore the burden of their lives but injected brightness into their day through laughter, Jacob became a vessel for their unheard voices. For once, he was not a mere observer in his own life. He was stepping into the role of an advocate. But as he drove deeper into the narrative, a flicker of unease ignited in the back of his mind. What if he was merely spinning a tale? What if the executives, who lived in a world of privilege, could not relate to these everyday sorrows? Each breath he took seemed to deepen the chasm between his heart and the boardroom full of suits. Then, as he shared a particularly heart-wrenching story about Maria's struggle to care for her sick child. He caught sight of a seasoned executive, a woman in her 50s, who watched him with an intensity that felt almost maternal. Her gaze spoke volumes, expressing compassion that bridged the evident gulf. That connection fueled Jacob's resolve, reminding him why he stood there. He was not just presenting a speech. He was illuminating realities that often went unseen, stories rendered invisible by systemic oversight. As he neared the end of his speech, he decided to pivot, calling upon his audience to consider their role in supporting those who prepared their spaces, those whose existence they often overlooked. "We are not invisible," he asserted, his voice growing stronger. "We have the power to change lives by acknowledging the humanity behind every uniform, every job title that seems beneath notice." The room held an uncomfortable silence, as if the weight of his words had absorbed all ambient sound. Jacob's chest tightened as a swirl of uncertainty surged anew. Would they take that challenge to heart, or would they react defensively, shutting down any discourse on equity and recognition? Finally, he delivered his closing lines, fueled now by an urgency that spurred him on. "Let us not just fill the spaces around us. Let us fill them with purpose and respect, because in every story lies the potential for change." With that, he stepped back, heart racing. The applause did not come immediately. Instead, confused murmurs rippled through the audience. Jacob's breath quickened as he wondered whether he had gone too far, if the moment had crumbled under the weight of his ambition. But then, the woman who had watched him intently stood up. "Thank you, Jacob," she said, her voice steady, cutting through the tension. "You've reminded us of our responsibility. We cannot afford to remain separate from those who work for us." In that moment, Jacob felt a surge of disbelief twist through him, tempered by the dawning realization that his voice could carry weight, that his vulnerability could break barriers. If she was willing to acknowledge his story, his struggles, could it be possible that the others might, too? As he stepped off the podium, the whirlwind of thoughts plagued him. Had he done enough? Would this spark a change? He was about to grasp the gravity of the moment when one executive approached him, a note of concern crossing his face. "We need to talk about what you just shared," she said, the intensity palpable in her gaze. Jacob nodded, mentally preparing for the unexpected yet again. What new challenges and opportunities awaited him now? Jacob felt the weight of scrutiny wash over him as the executive led him towards a quieter corner of the boardroom. The murmurs of his audience swelled behind him, but he didn't dare look back. Instead, he focused on the curve of the woman's lips, which seemed to harbor wisdom he craved yet feared. Her name was Linda, the woman at the helm of HR, known for her fierce advocacy of employee well-being. As they stepped away from prying eyes, Jacob's heart thudded against his ribs. "What you said was powerful," she began, her tone lowering to a conspiratorial whisper, "but it can be even more impactful if framed correctly." He regarded her with a mix of determination and uncertainty. "I wanted them to understand the humanity behind those they overlook." Did it resonate? Linda nodded slowly, considering, her fingers steepled under her chin. "Absolutely, but you must guide them through the discomfort. Disruption ignites change, it doesn't guarantee it. You need to prepare for resistance." Resistance? The word echoed painfully in Jacob's mind. He recalled the uncertainty that crept in at multiple moments during his speech, all those doubts bobbing like shadows just beneath the surface. "How do I prepare for that?" he asked, a nascent vulnerability creeping into his voice. "Start by anticipating the questions they want to ask. Like, how do they truly feel about equity? Have they ever fathomed the personal costs of their policies?" Linda watched him, her gaze measuring his resolve. "Then be ready to lead them into those tough conversations." His mind raced, processing her advice. He had unwittingly stirred the pot. Now it was about ensuring it didn't boil over. Would he have the skill to delve into the murky waters of corporate hesitation and privilege, guiding them toward genuine understanding? "I can do that," he said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "You're right. It's about navigating the discomfort, not merely breaching it." Linda smiled, but there was an urgency in her expression. "This is your moment, Jacob. Remember, speaking from experience can forge connections. Make them feel accountable. Showcase the pivotal role each executive could play in implementing real change." The dialogue shifted something inside him. It was less about fear and more about leadership. Jacob envisioned the power in wearing the mantle of advocate, not just for himself, but for countless unseen workers. Speak of purpose, speak of accountability he could manifest that as they concluded. Jacob left the room not quite transformed, but fundamentally shaken. An acknowledgement brewed deep within him, intertwining with determination. This wasn't merely about personal validation. It was about the imperative to innovate the very fabric of how their organization saw its employees. Days spent mulling over those words turned to evenings of solitary reflection. Jacob drafted plans while the din of corporate bureaucracy felt dense around him, imposing yet navigable. He began to outline how to frame personal stories in ways that had clarity and impact, propelling argument and fostering empathy. However, with clarity came another unsettling realization. The surface-level acknowledgement, although validating, didn't shield him from the inevitable waves of backlash. Some executives would surely see him as a threat, maybe even question his place. The first rehearsal in front of the board awaited him, and with it, the jagged anticipation of facing their defensiveness. Would he wield fear as a shield or use vulnerability as his sword? But what stirred the thunderstorms within wasn't merely battling their indifference. It was the potential to elevate conversations that could shift paradigm. Some inner voice urged him forward, igniting a hunger for not just survival, but for becoming the harbinger of change. As Jacob walked back to his desk, he felt a new rush of commitment electrify the air around him. He was ready to embrace the tension lying ahead. The next meeting would be his moment to rise. Yet a crucial question carved into his psyche as well. At what cost? Would this journey come? Weeks passed as Jacob prepared for the next meeting, a quiet fire igniting within him with each passing day. His heart, now heavily intertwined with purpose, pulsed with the faith he slowly regained. Each raised eyebrow, every whispered doubt, felt like a challenge, propelling him to embody more than just the labels he once wore. The transition from a janitor to a leader was nothing short of exhilarating. Yet every interaction surrounding him continually nudged at his resolve. The day of the rehearsal arrived, a sprawling conference room lined with polished tables and cold, uninterested faces. Jacob arrived early, ready to embed his thoughts into the fabric of his colleagues' minds. With a breath, he focused on stabilizing his fears. This was his moment to spark a change. As he stood tall in front of the board, the specter of doubt loomed, but beneath it lay an empowering current. They'd come to hear him, not just see him. Stepping into the presentation, he directly addressed the elephant in the room, their perceptions of labor and worth. Jacob began, pacing the room, deliberately elevating not just the janitorial staff, but the need to comprehend their roles as vital cogs in a grander wheel. Let us ask ourselves, who do we impact? By dismissing the value of our janitorial labor, we deny the collective humanity that we all share. As he wove through his stories of laborers, Maya, the custodial supervisor whose laughter brightened nighttime shifts, and Marcus, juggling school while fulfilling duties at the service desk, an understated tension filled the space. The expressions shifted from skepticism to surprise, their facial cues capturing intrigue in ways Jacob hadn't anticipated. One executive, a notoriously tough critic, raised his hand midway through. But don't people just see these roles as stepping stones? His tone dripped with condescension, the kind Jacob had prepared for yet still stung like a fresh wound. Leaning into the wave of discomfort, Jacob responded with composure. It's not about perception. It's about dignity. Each act of cleaning a space holds inherent value. We must remember these positions are not transitional. They're integral to our functioning society. The room fell into contemplative silence. He felt the weight of their gazes, intense yet less daunting than before. They were not there to dismantle his argument, but perhaps to understand. In that moment, Jacob recognized the palpable shift. He was not just a voice among the crowd. He was a bridge between worlds, an advocate for the often muted stories tucked away beneath societal expectations. The final moment of his presentation drew near, and Jacob felt poised under the high expectations of the room. We can induce change merely by acknowledging the narratives that live within our walls. Stepping back, he delivered a strategic call to action. Let us pave a future where respect is a norm, allowing everyone, no matter the role, to unify under commonality instead of tearing themselves apart. Allow our janitorial staff to stand at the forefront of recognition. When Jacob stepped down, applause filled the room, dynamics shifting from indifference to reverent recognition. For the first time, he felt a completeness wash over him, an assurance not rooted in arrogance, but in collective understanding. The boardroom buzzed with conversations now filled with aspiration rather than skepticism, a testament to the effectiveness of his earlier intention. Linda approached him as the meeting adjourned, her expression radiating pride. "You did well, Jacob. The executive board is discussing how to implement worker recognition protocols. It's the first step we need." The acknowledgement washed over him like a warm embrace. In a subsequent staff meeting, Jacob stood before his co-workers, a united coalition of once anonymous faces. Their laughter, their determination, lit sparks within each other, a sign of change to come. This moment felt like an endpoint and a beginning, an achievement that carried substantial weight without demeaning his janitorial roots. The transformation was tangible, as he represented not just himself but the collective dignity of workers. Jacob emerged with solid confidence, not simply the title of janitor. He had defied expectations, shaped a reality that spoke of honor and respect for all professions. In an unexpected turn of events, a local newspaper reached out for an article on his speech, choosing to highlight not just his heroism, but the broader implications of his message. That day, Jacob received his first real validation. The world was starting to recognize hard work without prejudice, reflecting the values he had longed for throughout his journey. Stepping into the future, Jacob felt grounded in purpose. He was now a proactive agent, a speaker of truth, and an advocate for all workers ready to unearth their worth. With courage rising within him like a revelation, he knew he was precisely where he was meant to be, standing tall, proud of his identity as a janitor and a leader. With every stride he took into his new reality, he felt the assurance growing clearer. This transformation was just one of many stories that needed to be told. And now, he was willing to lead that charge. Now is your moment to support stories of personal transformation. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and boost uplifting narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about Jacob's resolution. Let's keep this conversation going. And don't wait even one more second to share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspirational conclusion. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting this channel through these actions.